Hi everyone, Kris here, and welcome to Stone Age Gaming. The Legend of Zelda is turning 35 this year, and it's an amazing franchise that means a lot to a lot of people, myself included. So much so that I have managed to put together a quote-unquote complete US set of Zelda games, and I thought it would be a lot of fun to run down the list of all the games that I have and see what they all look like in one place and talk about some of my favorite memories with the franchise. Now, I used the word complete kind of loosely. I'll detail some of that stuff when we go through the games, but yes, I'm missing stuff like the limited edition Hyrule Warriors with the scarf and the Zelda mini classic that was like a reissue of the Game & Watch game that sells for an absurd amount of money these days. But outside of that, I think I've got it locked down pretty nice. So let's take a look. Okay, now I know I said complete US set, and really that's what this is all going to focus on, but this is one of those things that I have that I absolutely love, and because it's so important to Zelda history, let's take a look at it. It is the original Legend of Zelda, or the Hyrule Fantasy for Famicom Disk System. This was more or less a recent acquisition for me. I only got it a couple of years ago, and I just think these things are so fascinating. So if you've never seen the original Famicom Disk System version of Zelda before, this is what it looks like. They come in these cool little plastic boxes here. Look at the size of this instruction manual, and it is so full of cool things, like the stickers that you could apply to the actual disc, this crazy illustration about not touching or, I don't know, dunking your disc in water or something like that. And then you just kind of go through this wonderful Japanese instruction manual with this great artwork in it. Most of this stuff is also in the NES version, but seeing it in its original form here, these cute little pictures of Link, is really something else. It's just such a cool thing. I love this old artwork. And here's what the actual disc looks like. I always thought these discs were just the coolest thing in the world. I remember seeing them when I was a little kid. Somebody I knew, or somebody my parents knew, had a Famicom disk system, and for the longest time I thought I just imagined it because these things are so weird. But no, this is it. This is where the franchise started, right here. The Japanese Famicom Disk System Legend of Zelda. Very cool. Here is the original Legend of Zelda. That's the... Alright, so when I first played this, I came home from school or playing outside somewhere, and my sister had a friend over, and I heard them in the dungeon in this game. And that music was so incredibly haunting. So I actually heard that before I even heard any of the other amazing music in this game. And I just walked in there and I said, "What the heck is this?" And my sister was like, "No, get out," because she's my older sister and she didn't want me playing. But, you know, eventually I got it and I listened to the great music, and I'm just now realizing for the first time that these screenshots are from the Famicom Disk System version of the game. I never realized that before. You can tell by the font. These were in a different font when you got to the American version. That's really cool. So, as you know, these games came in wonderful gold cartridges, and this is my copy that's been taped several times over from all the rips and tears and squishes and whatnot. But there's the gold cart in all of its shiny glory. This is the later reissue. I don't have the original round circle seal version, but you know, it's good enough for me. It's mine. I loved it from when I was a kid, and I still have it to this day. So there's that. And there really, this just spawned such a ridiculous love, a franchise love for me. I fell in love with this world to no end. I was so into this game and its sequel. The funny story about this one is I wound up having nightmares one night because my save file got erased, and my parents wouldn't let me play this game anymore. They took Zelda away from me for a decent amount of time because I came into their room in the middle of the night talking about the axe or something. There isn't even an axe in this game. I don't know, whatever. This one's a circle seal, so that's pretty cool. I love the story in this one. I'm going to crack open this one just for the instruction manual. If you've never seen the instruction manual for A Link to the Past, it's really something else. Because this has the actual Legend of Zelda in it. I love this artwork. This whole story was so much to me, right? Because the original one has that super cool story and some of that great artwork. this one took it to the next level, and I used to take this instruction manual with me to school as my book to read. And my teachers were obviously turned off by the idea until I showed them just how much text was in here, because this is a full story. And introducing a third Triforce at this point, because there were only two. There was the Triforce of Wisdom and Power in the original game. And then this one's all like, oh no, there's a third one. It's the Triforce of Courage. And that was just the coolest darn thing to me, expanding the mythology like that. Mostly because it wasn't just that game and its sequel that really drew me to the world of The Legend of Zelda to an unfathomable degree. It was also this. If I can take a quick little sidestep here. I was also super into Mario. I was really into everything Nintendo, to be perfectly honest. And the Super Mario Super Show, I would, after school every day, would just flip out every time I got to watch it. But really, this one, every Friday they would show an episode of The Legend of Zelda. And you go back to it now, and this isn't a very good show. It's got more than its fair share of problems. But the music that played in the background, just the whole concept of an animated Zelda series was amazing to me. And yeah, you go back, I loved Voltron when I was a kid. You go back and watch the original Voltron, it's not so great, but there's still that wonderful nostalgic connection there. And it was this stuff that just wrapped me into this world to no end. I was just so completely consumed by it. And so from that point on, I was really completely hooked. That was it. Right from the get-go, this world meant everything to me. So sticking with the NES, just because I kind of want to break this down platform by platform, they were eventually re-released as the Classic Series, and these are the gray cartridge ones. So these were, I remember my old days working at Funko Land, these were slightly more sought after because they had newer batteries in them, you know? That's a gray cartridge, Legend of Zelda. Ha ha, isn't that something? And they don't have the super cool cutout because you're not looking at the gold cartridge anymore. But, well, I'll put that back in later. So that's NES Legend of Zelda games. Now next up, before we move on to anything else, you have a couple of LCD situations. This is the Zelda Game & Watch, and this is the first thing I'll point out. It is not a complete part of my collection. I do not have the box or manual for my Game & Watch or the Nelsonic Game Watch. I also don't have any of these batteries handy, so I can't actually let this run. But this I picked up a few years ago at a local game shop in North Jersey called Digital Press. I got a pretty good price on it, and just look at this amazing artwork. He's got the tiniest little dagger, but I love this art. It's so cool. And this, if you've never really messed with one of these before, is a dual screen. Looks a lot like a Nintendo DS. You got your trademark Nintendo D-pad going on there, your attack button, and of course it tells time. It's got a couple of, what are these, cutlasses? Please correct me in the comments. I'm not a sword expert, but these don't exist in The Legend of Zelda, so not entirely sure why those are there. But that's this is a wild little game. It's very, the artwork and everything makes it look very Zelda 1, but it's not scrolling, but from a sideways perspective, so it actually feels like it has more in common with Zelda 2. But it's a pretty fun little doodad. This guy, on the other hand, I remember walking around in the mall, the Hamilton Mall, when I was a kid, and I saw this thing at a kiosk, and I was just so completely blown away by it. And then a few days later, somebody at school had one. And I was like, you can play Zelda on your wrist? This is amazing. Now, obviously, it's a little LCD game. There's really not a whole lot to it. But it was the coolest thing in the world back then to strap a video game to your wrist. I mean, now I've got this, you know, Apple Watch here, which is ridiculous in comparison. But just look how cool this thing is. The little artwork and the key. I mean, this thing is just amazing. This also has a fun story. This was a gift from a friend of mine, Ferg. He's the host of the Atari 2600 Game by Game podcast. A few years ago when I was talking about trying to collect all of the Zelda games, one of the few things that I was missing was the Nelsonic Game Watch, and he sent this to me because he's an incredibly nice guy, and you should listen to his podcast. Alright, moving on. It was a little while before we got another Zelda game, but when we got one, what a game it was. We are talking about The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past. This game is a masterpiece. It's one of my absolute favorites in the entire series. It did get re-released as the Player's Choice Edition. Typically speaking, I don't collect the Player's Choice reissues of stuff. Like, I don't have the Wind Waker version because there's nothing noticeably different about them. But this actually has different packaging. Like, this pattern in the background here is completely unique, so I figured I should add it to my collection, and thus I did. But this guy here, this was mine from when I was a kid. This was the important one that I got right around when I first got my Super Nintendo, and I just want to crack this open for a little bit to show off a couple of the fun goodies inside. Playing this game for the first time after Zelda 2, and I love Zelda 2. I know a lot of people hate on that game. I love Zelda 2, but once we went back to the top-down perspective for A Link to the Past, man, you can see how my cartridge has definitely been through the ringer a bit here. But once you got back to the top-down perspective, and it just looked so cool. Why do I have two of these things in here? Huh, I guess this belongs to another, this probably belongs in there. Anyways, this image right here, the Master Sword in the Lost Woods, is gotta be my favorite image in all of Zelda, maybe all of video games. But just the look of this thing, man, look at these graphics. That was so cool. When you first start this up and it's raining outside, that was unreal. That was unlike anything else I had ever seen before. But it came with this cool little, tips and tricks thing to get you a little heads up, but it also came with this big map, which was really cool. I love this game. Okay, next up we have a game that surprised me, because how do you follow up A Link to the Past? You put the game on Game Boy. So this has so much in common, visually speaking, like on the box. It almost seemed like it was a remake of A Link to the Past, and turns out in early development there was a lot of that in this game's DNA. But really, black and white Game Boy game is a follow-up to one of the most beautiful games I'd ever played. I was skeptical, to say the least, but this game impressed me like mad. You can see this little hole here. You might see this in a bunch of my game boxes. I thumbtacked my boxes to my wall in my bedroom as a kid and lined them all up like I was at a video game store, because that's just the kind of nerd I am. But this game is so impressive and so heartfelt. Like, this has such an amazing story to it that I didn't really expect. And while it took so many cues from A Link to the Past, it really went in its own direction. And when it was eventually re-released in color as Link's Awakening DX with this really fun, shiny holograph? I don't know if that's the right word. Either way, it's foil-ish. Really fun. It includes new secret dungeon. This was really cool. Game looks good in color, I must say. They picked a nice image there to go on the back. That intro looks so much better in color. And this game is just a darn masterpiece. And I love that it got remade, but we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Then we had a long wait between good Zelda games, but I will say that that wait wasn't completely uneventful, because we have what is considered the unholy Triforce, the CDI games. Now we have Link, Faces of Evil, Zelda, The Wand of Gamelon, and Zelda's Adventure, and I'll go into this in just a second. So let's talk about these guys first. The first thing that I saw of a new Zelda game was Link, The Faces of Evil. Now, we had Zelda top-down, then we had Zelda 2, which was a side-scroller, then we had Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, were both top-down again. Then I see this infomercial on TV for the Philips CDI, and it just looked like the future, you know? There was this sense of, oh, the CD technology, look what they're doing with them, and are you kidding me? There's a Zelda game on this? So they showed off Link Faces of Evil, and I was so impressed by this thing. I remember that music, because you had never heard anything that sounded of that quality in a Zelda game before, as far as like the actual sound fidelity, not actual quality. Though this game does have a surprisingly good soundtrack, and all the animated cutscenes and whatnot. As a little kid, you look at them now and you're like, these are terrible. But as a little kid, I was watching that cartoon, and this seemed pretty much like, here's a video game with the cartoon aesthetic incorporated into it. So here's Link Faces of Evil. This took me a long time to actually track down, and I eventually got this and Wand of Gamelon at the same time. And here's the game. This is what it looks like. There's the disc. And let's take a quick peek inside the instruction manual. I'm not going to go through everything on the later games, but I know some of this stuff isn't... A lot of people don't have these games, and for good reason, because they are very bad. As much as I was enamored by them and their announcements, when you actually play these things, they are just dreadful. Interesting, but dreadful. Newsflash, Zelda is missing. Okay. So that's Link Faces of Evil, but also released at the same time, but not shown in the CDI infomercial, was Zelda the Wand of Gamelon. And this one I saw in a store. It was my local electronics boutique, and I remember seeing this one like, whoa, there's two of them? And this one you play as Zelda? That's actually really cool. Look at this, I got this little CDI thing in here. So here's Zelda Wand of Gamelon. Say what you will about these games, their box art's pretty awesome. I mean, look at these two next to each other. Just, they make a heck of a pair. This is really good packaging. I love the art direction on these, but I don't think the instruction manual is all that interesting on this one, to be perfectly honest with you. Yeah, it looks pretty much the same as the other one. Oh, newsflash! Villagers are disappearing! And, you know, here you go. CDI titles. Man, CDI was a heck of a thing, huh? So there's Zelda Wand of Gamelon. Now the third Zelda game that was released on the CDI, again, this was all during a lull between Link's Awakening and Ocarina of Time, right? So Zelda 64 is still, we hadn't even heard of it. These were the Zelda games. This is what was next as far as anyone knew. And then the third one is Zelda's Adventure. Now, this is another one of those caveats that I'm going to point out. This is actually a repro disc. Because this is the copy of the game that I have. Now, during one of those hurricanes, Sandy or whichever other one was nearby, my basement flooded. And when that happened, my CDI got drowned because it was in a box on the floor in my basement, and it was completely drowned in water and it didn't work anymore. Now, I had recently gotten my my Wand of Gamelon and Faces of Evil, and I was totally broken up about the fact that I had a functioning CDI and I'd had it for years and it was totally broken. So I went online and I found somebody who actually used to work for Philips and did CDI repairs still, which was kind of a crazy story. I dropped off my CDI, drove into the city because I was living up in North Jersey, so I drove into New York City, dropped it off to him, and a few days later he returned it to me, and he returned it to me with this, which I thought was a burnt disc, but this is not a sticker on here. This is actually printed on here. And he said that he would give out these were demo discs that he used to give out with his systems and stuff when he did repairs when he worked for Philips. And this is, in fact, the full game, and it works like a charm. Now, obviously, tracking down the original game in all of its glory is a massively expensive proposition, and this game is putrid. If these games are bad, this game is terrible. I hate this game. I tried playing it on a charity stream a while back, and I just hated it. But this is a really nice reproduction of the game. Unfortunately, the disc doesn't work great. It might just be my CDI that it's old, but it skips around a lot. But the printing is really high quality, and this is about as close as I'm ever going to get to the real thing, because I'm not paying an exorbitant amount of dollars just to have this awful, awful game in real form, especially not when I have this one, which has a pretty great story behind it. Alright, so after the Philips CDI stunk up the Zelda market, the true Zelda sequel finally happened, and that was this little masterpiece right here. The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. This is my launch day collector's edition. I worked at Funko Land at the time. I had this pre-ordered, obviously, and I was so super excited for it because I'm going to take it out of the box protector, because if you've never seen this box in person, it's really one of the coolest ones. It's super shiny. And this little, you know, the lines in the background are all just, this thing is so cool looking. I don't think the camera's really doing it any justice because it's magnificent. And this is yet again a gold cartridge. And you can see I got a lot of use out of mine. It's a little beat up, but it's mine. It still has my save file, and it is still functional. And boy, did this game just change everything. You go back and look at it now, and there are certain aspects of it that haven't aged extraordinarily gracefully, but man, the hype for this game was unbelievable. It was unlike anything I had seen up to that point. This was just such a massive deal. I remember just being so completely consumed by this game's future existence back then, and unreasonably excited to get it home and play it and really experience a 3D Zelda game. And it delivered, man. This game was really cool. It had callbacks to Zelda 2 with all the sages' names and everything. It also got reissued several times over. This is the standard gray cart of Ocarina of Time. As you can see, this is Collector's Edition. This is just Ocarina of Time, and this, I think, this is way more common than the other one. It's just a gray cart, Ocarina of Time. Pretty neat, but this one right here, this is good as gold, man, because this has the chanting and the fire temple. This has, when you beat Ganon, he's got red blood he coughs up at the end instead of the green blood that they eventually edited it to. And also on N64, got a follow-up in the form of Majora's Mask. Here's the regular edition and the collector's edition. This one here, I'm a little unsure of. So I was also still working at FunColan when this came out, and I remember very specifically, this is the copy that I bought on day one. It's the collector's edition, and it has the super cool lenticular label, right? So you got a gold cart, but you also have this lenticular label going on. Now, as far as how this other one was packaged, I'm not 100% sure I got this right, because I've never actually seen this one new and collected together, because you work at FunColan, which was a used game store. You get people trading in all kinds of weird stuff and mismatches. So eventually I just pieced this together. I had this box, I had another copy of the instruction manual, which I've never seen any differences in, and then I had a copy of this version where it's just a flat label. I've never seen a gray cart Majora's Mask, so if that exists, please let me know. At least in the US, it may have been gray in other territories, but I don't love this game. When it launched, I remember feeling like we had just gotten the Dreamcast demo unit in our store, and I'm playing stuff like Sonic Adventure and Ready to Rumble Boxing, which you think, oh, Ready to Rumble Boxing, that's a better game than Majora's Mask? Well, no, of course not. But at the time, you think about all the, what was it like seeing games look like that? Because this generation was so chunky and blocky, especially for Nintendo fans, right? You look at PlayStation games, I think have aged a lot better than N64 games, and I say aged better. I didn't like the way they looked to begin with, but I remember just the gorgeous games on Super Nintendo, and then we went 3D, and it was like stepping back to Atari in a lot of ways, where everything's just these very basic geometry, and this game in particular just never really sat well with me. I don't hate it, but I also don't love it, and I know that's kind of sacrilege. I appreciate it very much, but yeah, didn't really knock my socks off. We also have these fun little games, Oracle of Ages and Oracle of Seasons. These are Capcom joints, and they're weird. These are other ones that I've tried to play through several times. I've never actually beaten these ones, but I was really excited to buy them. Because, well, what's a Capcom-developed Zelda game even like? My only problem with them is that they felt so derivative of Link's Awakening that I kind of just really wrote them off a lot. But I love this artwork on these boxes. They're nice and shiny, and it's a really, really good look. I love the names, and if they ever remake these the way they did Link's Awakening, I'd probably be a pretty happy camper. So, Game Boy Advance got, those. This is the reissue of Link to the Past, and it includes 4 swords. This was the first multiplayer Legend of Zelda, and it's pretty neat. I didn't get a chance to play this too much with other people at the time, so I don't have a ton of experience with this specific version, but I did play through A Link to the Past, and this incorporated a lot of sounds from Wind Waker into it, so I thought that was really unnecessary. Was it Wind Waker or Ocarina? I can't remember exactly when this came out in relation to it. That's why I'm breaking these down by platform instead of by release date, because I just can't remember it all off the top of my head. But either way, there was a lot of voice work in this that I thought was completely unnecessary. But either way, it was really amazing to have properly A Link to the Past portably. Also on Game Boy Advance, we had reissues in the classic NES series of Legend of Zelda and Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. And these versions are kind of terrible. They were really novel at the time to have, you know, handheld versions of these games, but boy, these, they cut out, I think the way that it was explained to me is they cut out every couple of lines of pixels. They just dropped it. So the characters are all very odd looking. The squares aren't squares. You can kind of see it in these bushes here. Like they're just cut off at the top. It's not a great look, but again, there was a certain novelty to it, and this whole line with the classic NES series was pretty cool. And then also on Game Boy Advance, you have The Legend of Zelda, the Minish Cap. This one is kind of a source of shame for me. I have never finished this game, but I did have to. I also had to track down other pieces of it. I played the beginning of it a bunch, and I do really like this one. I think this one's really interesting. It's got a cool look. It's got a cool story, and but what I like a lot about this is that I had to track down a box and manual separately later, and in fact, I might not even have a manual in here, but the cart itself is... Come on out of here. Come on out, fella. It's a not-for-resale cart. Dun, dun, dun! I was working, I think, at a GameStop at this time, and this was in... No, this must have still been Game Crazy. Anyway, this was in our interactive, and they never came back for the interactive, so I just took this game, and it's the full game as far as I can tell. Again, I've never actually finished it, so maybe I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure this is just the full game, and it's neat. All right, let's switch over to GameCube. We've got some cool stuff on the GameCube. GameCube had some great Zelda stuff. We had this, which was this bonus disc where you could get Ocarina of Time and Ocarina of Time Master Quest, which was basically like the second quest from the original Legend of Zelda, where it's just a remix of Ocarina of Time, and that was just so super cool. And it had a bunch of other cool demos on there too. Look at that special preview. Look at that artwork. I love Wind Waker. We'll get there. But this is such a cool disc, and you could also take a sneak peek at Metroid Prime and Link to the Past and Four Swords and Wind Waker and F-Zero, and man, what a cool time this was. The GameCube had its issues, but boy, this was a good time, especially for us Zelda fans. Also, you had this little bonus disc. This promotional disc was so wild at the time because this was Zelda, Zelda 2, Ocarina of Time, and a really crappy version of Majora's Mask that had, there was a warning when you booted it up that told you about it stutters whenever you go in and out of places because they had a hard time emulating it, I guess, because of the expansion pack, I think was what they were talking about. But either way, this was such a cool thing. Playing through Zelda and A Link to the Past on the GameCube, like, Virtual Console didn't exist. Reissuing these old games wasn't a thing that happened as much back then, so this was just kind of sort of awesome. Meanwhile, Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. This is my favorite game of all time. I absolutely love this game, and I hated it the first time I saw it. Remember with the GameCube, before it launched, there was that amazing tech demo where you saw Link and Ganondorf fighting each other, a big crazy sword fight, and it was very Ocarina of Time's art style. Then they released the trailer for this thing, and it was just awful. It was Looney Tunes, it was ugly and giant cat eyes, and I hated everything about it because I wanted my Zelda games to be grown up and mature and raw, and I just hated it. I hated every ounce of it. But then a year later, they were showing it off at E3, and I was watching gameplay footage of it online. Goodness, thinking about 56K modems streaming all this stuff back then. I was watching a demo of this, and as soon as I saw him running around an Outset Island, it like a light switch went off. It's like, this isn't Looney Tunes, it's Samurai Jack. And it really clicked for me, like with the cell shading. And when I wound up getting the game, I was so impressed with it, so completely and totally blown away, that it still remains my favorite game of all time. I get this wonderful sense of adventure every time I play it. I love the sailing. I love just putting up my sail and letting it go. I love the artwork. I didn't at first, but man, did it grow on me. Everything about this game, when Valoo breathes fire all over Ganondorf, this version of Ganondorf was so cool. Man, this game's amazing. It's just the best. We also have this guy over here. I know this came in a big cardboard box. I know where it is. It's in my attic in a box that I do not feel like digging through. It's with a couple of my other big box things. I just took these out because it looks so much better on my shelf. But Four Swords Adventures is such a cool game, and I do not know why it does not exist on Switch. It's crazy to me that they haven't put this game on Switch with online play, because a couple of friends of mine got together with our Game Boy Advances and link cables, and we would get together every couple of months and play, and we eventually beat this game, and it's amazing. It's so clever. It's so pretty. It's like looks very Link to the Past, but with Wind Waker flourishes on top of it, and amazing special effects and really good music. This game rules, and playing it with the Game Boy Advances is super cumbersome, but it doesn't really matter. It's worth it. It's worth every second of inconvenience to play this game the way it was meant to be played. This game is great. All right, then we have Twilight Princess. I have so many thoughts on this game. First off, when this trailer dropped, you know, that's the E3 moment, you know, when they dropped this trailer, and then Miyamoto is there at the end with the Master Sword, and this game looked amazing. It's still one of the coolest trailers I've ever seen, with the Conan music going on in the background and blades will bleed and all that. What a moment that was to see. And it went through some changes. It went through some delays. It actually wound up launching on the Wii, and kind of taking over. Like, this kind of became the main version, you know. You wanted to play it in widescreen, this is where you played it. You got your brand new Nintendo system, the Wii, this is your brand new Zelda game to go with it. And it was a really remarkable experience on Wii, but this game with button controls I just think works better. You can just kind of feel that this was where it was designed, you know. This is where its heart and soul was, and as great a job as they did repackaging this for the Wii, I still kind of like playing the GameCube version, even though it is only in a 4x3. I don't love this game that much anymore, but I haven't given it a proper chance, to be perfectly honest with you. I played the HD remake not that long ago, but I didn't get too far into it before giving up just due to time constraints. But either way, at the time when this game launched, all the trailers related to this were amazing. What a fun time to be a Zelda fan. Sticking with the Wii, we had a direct sequel to Twilight Princess in the form of, boom, Link's crossbow training. This is a reproduction box that's full size, which is super cool. This is what it actually came in, was a sleeve. And I don't know where my sleeve is. You know, it's probably in my Zapper box. This came with the Wii Zapper, which was a hollow piece of plastic that you put a Wii remote in. It was not an actual accessory, but they sure touted it as one. And honestly, I think this game plays way better without it. This is a remarkably fun game. It's a third-person shooter in the Zelda universe. It's not a masterpiece, but this game is really cool, and it deserves more credit than it gets. And then finally, the Wii finished off with Skyward Sword, which they just announced is getting an HD remake for the Switch. And I'm pretty excited to play through this on the Switch. This came in my collector's edition. Again, box is in my attic, know where it is. And inside of that box is also the gold Wii Remote nunchuck that came with this, because this game required the Wii Motion Plus. And because it was all... This game basically was the proof of concept that they started off with Wii Sports. Like, all the stuff that you learned in Wii Sports and Wii Sports Resort was all like working towards this. And when it worked really well. I wound up playing this game, and that was on my HD TV, and it looked pretty nice, but I was in an apartment where I didn't have any direct sunlight in my living room, so everything worked great. Everything pointer related, all the motion controls worked great for me. Unfortunately, I know there are a lot of people out there whose motion controls did not work at all, so the fact that this game is being re-released on Switch with regular controls, I think, is an amazing thing. I don't know how I'm going to play through it. I'm probably going to play through it with regular controls because I don't like swinging my arms around. But then again, man, when this worked, was it the Kalaktos boss, I think was what he was called, the big robot? There are so many great moments in this game. This game's a bit of a slog sometimes. It's not perfect, and I wonder if they're going to streamline it all in the HD version. But boy, when this game shines, it shines. It's really cool. It's got a fun story, some great characters, And I like this box art too. I love the art direction in this game. That was another problem I had with... oh, right, I forgot this had the bonus CD in here. I thought that was in a sleeve inside the box, but it's a whole second disc in here, and that's something. Twilight Princess, I feel like its art direction in a lot of ways is kind of grotesque, and maybe intentionally so, but I love this art direction. It's kind of like a halfway point between Wind Waker and Twilight Princess, was this bright but somehow more detailed look. This is a very cool game, and I'm glad more people are going to get to play it. So let's move on to the Nintendo DS. I can't remember what came out first, but I'm going to show off this one first. This is my 3DS, where I have the this one here, which is the Four Swords Anniversary Edition, and it's not on the title screen anymore, so I'm going to go back to it. But they reissued for a very limited time the original Four Swords, just as a multiplayer thing through DSiWare. This is my 3DS, which is where I have mine. There we go, Four Swords Anniversary Edition. This is the only digital-only US release Zelda game. Now, I know there's others out there, like the BSX Satellaview stuff, that never came out in America, so I'm going to go ahead and not count that for my collection issues. But yes, here is a Four Swords Anniversary Edition. This I did get to play through because this has a single-player mode added to it. It's not the most amazing thing that's ever happened in the history of the world, but it's pretty fun, and I like it. Now, also on the DS, there was a, given out at E3, there was a DS card that had the trailer for Twilight Princess on it, and I do not have that, and those also go for a stupid amount of money, so that's another hole in my quote-unquote complete collection, but it's a trailer on a game card, so I don't really consider that its own unique release, so that's how I skirt that issue. Meanwhile, on the DS, we had a couple of actual releases. First up, we had the direct sequel to my favorite game ever, Wind Waker, in the form of Phantom Hourglass. And this is a game that I have struggled to enjoy several times. It's got a lot of clever ideas in it. It's controlled entirely via the stylus. I don't like it. I wish I did, but I don't. I've tried several times. I may try again in the future if it ever gets, remade or remastered, but yeah, no, I don't love this game. I wish I did, but I don't. Its sequel, on the other hand, I also don't love. This is Spirit Tracks. This is Zelda and Trains, which is cool. This is another one I haven't really tried a lot of. I feel like I would like this one a bit more than Phantom Hourglass, but I haven't convinced myself to give it a proper try without finishing Phantom Hourglass because that's because I'm a goober. So yeah, that's Spirit Tracks, and that's the DS. Okay, next up, let's talk Wii U. The Wii U had a good place for Zelda games. Besides the Virtual Console, you had the first of the HD remakes, Wind Waker HD. This is it right here. This is the cap for me. This is better than the original in almost every way. I think there are a few tiny things in the original that I think maybe look a tiny bit better based on just my memories or whatever, but this game is phenomenal. And playing this one, when I first had my son, he used to nap on me. So I would lay down on the couch and he would nap on my chest, and I would have the Wii U gamepad on the table displaying the map and this game on the TV. And it was like the best possible way to play this because you had the two screens going at once. I'm up there, and anything that I needed to get to on the touchscreen, I could just reach over and touch it and chart the whole world. And I love this cover with the gold, and this artwork is great. And Wii U discs are the best because they're all round, and love this. Of course, they also followed it up by remastering Twilight Princess HD. Now, both of these I got the special editions of. You probably saw it in the video in the beginning. On my shelf, I have the Ganondorf that came in here. I have the Wolf Link, the amiibo that came in this one, but they are in that box in my attic, and I'm not getting them out because they're safe there, and what a pain that would be to get. But yeah, here's Twilight Princess HD. HDing Twilight Princess's graphics did not work out as well as I expected it to, but it's still a cool game, and I will play this again, I guess on Wii U, if they're never going to release it on Switch. We'll find out. Also on Wii U, we got Hyrule Warriors, this wad of insanity. I've never been a fan of Muso games. I do not have the collector's edition of this that came with the scarf. It was available, I think, for a single day at the Nintendo World Store in New York, and I was nowhere near that store on launch day, and even if you were, you had to be in line. There's so few of them out there, and it was just a scarf. Same exact game, came with a scarf. So, but I do have this, and I played a bunch of it, and it didn't really stick with me. I laughed a lot while playing it because it's just a fascinating thing. God, this was also when they were doing this with the cases. You have this, like, all the warning information printed on the back of the artwork, which is pretty wild. So, you know, Hyrule Warriors, it's a thing, and it continues to be a thing, as you will see when we move on to the 3DS. But first, the swan song for the Wii U, the Wii U version of Breath of the Wild, one of my favorite games I've ever played. And it's really fun looking at this from the lens of most people experience this as a Switch game. Because, you know, most people that were just getting into these things at the time didn't really understand what the Wii U was, or that it was even really a thing. But when you look at this game and the Sheikah slate, you can so tell that it was designed with the Wii U gamepad in mind. And it's kind of a shame that all that stuff got stripped out eventually. I would have loved to see where this game went full potential if the Switch hadn't existed, right? The Wii U was a success and they followed through with Breath of the Wild as a Wii U experience. I think it would have been a really interesting thing to see where they went with it. But the game that we got turned out to be one of the most amazing gaming experiences I've ever had. I have not really touched the Wii U version all that much because the Switch version was just perfect, but I had to buy it because it's a Zelda game and I have to buy Zelda games. So let's transition over to the 3DS. The 3DS started off with Ocarina of Time 3D, which is pretty cool because at first I didn't really realize when they announced it that this is a remake. They redid the graphics on this game, and they unfortunately didn't redo the sound because it still sounds like an N64 game and really cruddy trumpet sounds and whatnot, which is kind of bothersome. But outside of that, this is the best way to play Ocarina of Time. And it's kind of a shame that it's relegated to 3DS because I would love to see this on a TV. Because I do love Ocarina of Time, warts and all, and this is just such a cleaner and prettier version of it. It's so much less angular, and it's a really great way to play the game. And the 3D effect works pretty well in it too. So they released that game, and of course everybody was begging for it, so they did. Majora's Mask 3D, and while it looks so much better than the N64 game, the N64 Majora's Mask is just such an ugly game. This looks a heck of a lot better. Unfortunately, it is flat out broken in a lot of ways, and I didn't even realize it because not being a huge fan of Majora's Mask, I didn't spend a lot of time playing this. I haven't ever finished the 3DS version, and I probably never will because I was reading about all the things they changed, like the way the Deku Scrub jumps. There are certain places in the game where you would jump from lily pad to lily pad, and it was just the easiest thing in the world in N64, and it's almost impossible in here because they changed the way it works. The swimming doesn't really work right either. Like, they just kind of broke this game in the process of fixing it, and that's a huge shame. But it is a thing that exists, so I guess if you really want to play Majora's Mask. Now, on the other hand, you've got this, which is awesome. This is A Link Between Worlds. This is a direct sequel to A Link to the Past. It takes place in the same world. Sorry about these little white dots on my backdrop here. Games are dirty. Anyway, yeah, this was a really fun game. I didn't love it as much as a lot of people did because I wasn't crazy about the fact that, and this is just me being a lunatic nitpicker, the Dark World in A Link to the Past was a reflection of the evil in Ganon's heart. Lorule in this game looks, sounds, and functions just like the Dark World that doesn't exist anymore. So it just irks me that they didn't, if they had made Lorule something considerably different and that the world had changed more, because I think this is supposed to be like 100 years after A Link to the Past, and technology hasn't really advanced much at all. I would have loved to see them take the world of A Link to the Past and show what it really looked like all this time later. Like, you think of Avatar: The Last Airbender and then where Legend of Korra picks up, you know? Say what you will about Legend of Korra, it's still fascinating to see that world all those years later, and that's what I would have liked to see, all those landmarks. But, You know, maybe they expanded the library, or there's the Kakariko Village is larger. Maybe there's houses in the Lost Woods now. Who knows? It would have been cooler to see more of a change. But still, those gripes aside, this is a fantastic game, and I would love to see it ported to modern consoles eventually. You also got this, which is, I think, a game that is unfortunately looked down upon more than it deserves. Multiplayer Zelda can be very fun. Obviously, this isn't an amazing game, but if you get 3 people together to play this, it's really fun. It's very silly. It's well designed. It's got cool music. This is a fun game, and if you have the opportunity to play it multiplayer, playing it's anything less than 3 people, and this game is a shadow of itself. But you get 3 friends together playing this game, obviously not currently because of the pandemic, but you get 3 people playing this together, you can have a lot of really good times with it. And last, and certainly least on the 3DS, we have this abomination. This is the barely functional but utterly fascinating Hyrule Warriors Legends on 3DS. This has more content than the Wii U game on a darn 3DS cartridge. And unfortunately, it really struggles on a regular 3DS. You can really only play this game on new 3DS, and even then, I don't recommend it. It's certainly an experience. But fortunately, all that stuff would show up later on the Switch, which brings us to the last platform, the Switch. Launched with, we showed off earlier, Legend of Zelda, Breath of the Wild. One of the best launch games I've ever played. I know some people didn't. This game didn't click with some people, but it clicked with a lot of people, and just being a part of the conversation when we're all trying to figure out what to do and everyone's going different ways. This game's a masterpiece, and I love it, but we've already talked about it, so let's move on to the next Zelda game. You know what, we'll just do these out of order, because this was the next one on my pile, and that's the Link's Awakening remake, with frame rate issues that are completely and totally inexplicable, because this game is not taxing. But I don't care, because it's so charming, it's so good. I love that it's a one-to-one remake of the Game Boy game. I love that about it. Would have been cool to see a little bit more of an expansion on it, to then take a little bit more risks. Yes, that would have been cool. But for what this is, it was worth every penny to me to play through this game. This is the version that I'm going to play from now on. Just having all the weapons and items mapped to multiple buttons instead of having to constantly go in and out of the menu, that changed so much on its own. So, and look at this guy. Look how freaking cute he is. He's adorable. Wonderful game. Then we got, oh look, it's back. Hyrule Warriors. Yet again, the 3rd iteration of Hyrule Warriors. It is effectively the same game. This is the definitive edition. This is all the Wii U stuff, all the 3DS stuff, without all of the 3DS graphical issues. And, I bought this game pretty recently, and I still haven't played the Switch version. I don't even think I've put this in my system yet. I just, you know, bought it because it was a Zelda game that I didn't already have. But with this one over here, Age of Calamity, I am a decent way into this game, and this is pretty fun. So maybe when I finish this, I might go back to try this one again, because this one didn't really grab me, but this one kind of did. I'm having a ball with this, so maybe this will tie into this. But meanwhile, while we're talking about Age of Calamity, here's a prequel to Breath of the Wild told through a Musou game. And it's pretty recent, so I guess there's not really a whole lot of sense in going through with it. There's going to be some new DLC. I think this game's cool, and again, I love the art direction. And as far as I know, the last release of Zelda was this guy. I believe this game actually came out before Age of Calamity, but the physical release, I think, was more recent, and that's why it's last on my pile. I also think this game is fascinating. If you are unfamiliar with it, this was Crypt of the Necrodancer, and this was an indie studio being allowed to make a Zelda game and crossing it over with their own property. This is really wild, and I loved this game. It took a lot of getting used to, but it's got a great art direction that pulls a lot of influences from A Link to the Past. And this physical edition was released not that long ago. Bare bones. There's no manual or anything, obviously, but it's Cadence of Hyrule, Crypt of the Necrodancer featuring The Legend of Zelda. It's a rhythm-based Zelda game, and it is totally, totally awesome. And that's it. And there you have it. Legend of Zelda is a fantastic series. It's been around for 35 years. With any luck, it'll be around for 35 more. If you enjoyed this video, please comment, like, and subscribe. And by all means, tell me stories of your history with Legend of Zelda. What are the coolest things that ever happened to you while you were playing Zelda? Did Zelda 2 scare you into having nightmares like it did me? I'd love to read all about it. Thank you very much for watching. Keep playing games.